An extremely hot topic in this week's Football Fun Factory podcast. We're going to be talking about, should there be A and B teams in children's football? This is going to cause a bit of a stir, Luke, don't you think?
Yeah, I think there's an argument for both cases. I don't want to give too much away, so I'm looking forward to receiving my envelope and arguing the point, wherever it may be.
Johnny, envelope or envelope? Which one are you?
Envelope, I think.
What did I say?
I think you said envelope.
Envelope.
I've got two envelopes here, and let's put this.
Spelled with an E.
Let's put this topic on trial. If you're just tuning in to the Football Fun Factory podcast for the first time, this is the section of the podcast where we have two envelopes, and Jonny and Luke have to represent the view on the envelope, no matter what it may be. Luke, that one's for you. Jonny, that's yours.
Thank you.
So these guys are going to first of all read out what's on their card. They're then going to deliver an opening statement, and they're going to put each other on the stand in James's court. I'm Judge James, and I will be ruling proceedings to see who is this week's winner. Jonny, would you like to read your statement first?
A and B teams help children and coaches create a level playing field. I fully support ability appropriate teams.
Jonny is very pro A and B teams. Luke?
Children should not be split into ability appropriate A and B teams. This is detrimental to children's confidence and should be banned.
Should be banned. Very strong view. Jonny, could you give us an opening statement and really back up your card?
Yeah, I think there is no point children playing each and every week if they are sort of out their depth, if they're struggling to compete, if they're getting beat every week or they're not getting a touch of the ball and they're essentially not enjoying themselves because they're just up against it all the time. So I think it's really important to have children split into ability appropriate groups to help create an environment where they can sort of feel comfortable in and they can enjoy.
So, to start the statement, you said then that children that are sort of out their depth shouldn't play football every week. Is that what you said?
No, that's not what I said at all. I said that children...
That's what Luke heard.
Yeah,
maybe not what you said.
He only ever hears what he wants to hear. No, so I think, obviously there are two teams. There's an A and a B team, a C team, whatever it may be.
C team.
And I think that children should play in a team that is appropriate to their level of ability, so they can play every week, but they're not then playing in a team that is too advanced for their ability level.
Right, and that's from the moment that they start playing football in their grassroots team at the under 6, under 7 age groups.
Yeah, definitely.
So would you not think that within that, like the children that are perceived at a higher level would just be the bigger, stronger children at that age?
Yeah, I think that probably will be the case at those youngest age groups. But I don't see that as a barrier to what I'm trying to say.
Would that, do you not think, so some of them children that may be more technically gifted than the bigger, stronger boys or girls, but they get more of the ball because they are stronger, but they don't get the opportunity to play with them because they're at a smaller sort of size, they're in the B or the C team that you spoke about, and they don't get the opportunity to do that, and may affect their sort of confidence to then continually develop within the game?
I think children as young as sort of 5 and 6 are the age groups that you're talking about. I think that they won't really be that aware of their confidence levels and those types of things. I think if they're in a supportive environment where they're getting success, they're enjoying their football, they're more likely to then stay in the game and progress in later years. I don't see there any point in a 5 or 6 year old playing against children twice their size, twice their physical ability, and then not getting touches of the ball.
Quick question from the judge. Do you think they'll be aware of then, you say their confidence levels, do you think they'll be aware of which team they're in? So obviously being in the B team, do you think there's an awareness of that, or do they care about that?
So I think a lot of teams these days call it blue, yellow, and in the past it used to be tigers and lions, I think, and ultimately the coaches know that, the parents may know that, but the children are probably unaware.
Can I ask one more question?
No.
I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think the challenge on that is more... James, let me ask a question.
No. So do you... We'll discuss that later. That's not how it works.
Apologies.
Thank you. And this week's winner's Jonny.
Get in.
So Luke, can you read out your statement and maybe you get a chance to talk about what you want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll do. Children should not be split into ability appropriate A and B teams. This is detrimental to the children's confidence and should be banned. So I think we spoke about them youngest ages. I don't think anyone can really know the level of the child. It's their first experience playing football. They should all be mixed together. If there's enough players, which is brilliant, there should be 2 teams, but I don't think they should be split into ability appropriate groups at them youngest ages.
You mentioned not knowing. Surely after 2-3 games you'll see the children that are sort of thriving in that environment and those that are really struggling and maybe not getting lots of touches of the football during a match or being sort of negatively impacted during that game.
No, I don't think you can. I think you can see that some are bigger and stronger, but I think it's important to mix the different sizes of the children together. So all the big kids aren't playing together and then all the little kids are playing together. I think there should be a mix of the children. I think they should be I don't even think it is ability, it's more size appropriate groups. I think they should have the opportunity to play together and mix them up so you get different challenges throughout those training sessions and fixtures.
But are you saying then if a child is, okay, in your argument, smaller and not as big as the other children, but they're getting pushed off the ball, they're not getting very many touches, they're sort of just standing there a little bit lost within the game, do you think that's good for that child?
I think if it is a mix, so obviously all these children train together, so they're going to sort of have them challenges. I don't think it's bad for the child. I think the opportunity to play in that, I think to split them into ability appropriate groups, it just stays like that then for the next few years. And if it is called an A and a B team, I think the children do start to understand that after a while. And I think even a bigger challenge is sort of the parents seeing that and them getting upset, annoyed that their child's in the perceived weaker team. And I think to mix the teams makes a lot more sense.
I think just without the sort of introduction of A and B teams at those youngest age groups and the level and ability appropriate groups, I think you'll lose children at 5-6 years old because they're just not touching it, they're not enjoying it, they're not getting goes on the pitch because they're just getting bullied by children that are essentially better than them and then they're not able to then play.
But I think that's football in general, isn't it? I don't think it's, if children want to play football, they're going to play football. We're talking about sort of the bigger team, the bigger players in the A team, the smaller players in the B team, but then that's probably not going to be the case on the Saturday or the Sunday where they play because you don't know what other teams are doing in terms of their mix of players. So I think that's still going to be the case and that's still going to happen regardless.
Okay, I'm going to draw an end to proceedings. A fantastic discussion, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this in terms of what we actually think. I think quite a lot of what we actually think was actually included within that discussion. So I think there's a great debate to be had. This week's prize, as you know, when Luke was the judge, he used to bring in his Premier League winners medal and he used to award it to Jonny or I each week. We were always desperate to get our hands on that and wear it around our necks. With me as the judge, I don't have a Premier League winners medal, but what I do have is a load of things that I find around the office just before the podcast to present. This week's is our sponsorship brochure, which is all about how the Football Fun Factory is currently seeking a headline sponsor. And what we would love to do is partner with an organisation that can help us grow their brand and work together really, really effectively. We have such huge digital media reach, such as the Football Fun Factory podcast, our website, all of our social media pages. And I'm going to present this wonderful glossy brochure to one of you guys as this week's prize.
Great plug, James. Fantastic.
I was just explaining what the prize was.
yeah.
And this week's winner is someone that argued the case incredibly well, and I'd be really interested to see what their actual views are. So a big round of applause from the opposing person, please, in the view of sportsmanship. But this week's winner is Jonny.
Thanks very much.
Round of applause from Luke.
Please, Luke.
Nope. Well done, John.
Fantastic sportsmanship, Luke. I'm going to get rid of this wig, get rid of the gown, and we're going to find out what we actually think. Come on then, guys, let's see what we really think. Jonny, A and B teams or not?
I think the sort of idea of it makes a lot of sense, putting children into ability appropriate groups. Obviously, sort of my background in academy football, what we used to do is an individual plan for all of the different children. Sometimes that would be playing up, sometimes that would be playing down an age group to try and find a appropriate sort of match for them at their current stage of their development journey. We also then used to try and organise games against different teams for certain children. So for example, when we'd then go and play like Manchester City, we'd take a certain group because it was matching with their ability at the time. Obviously that's not as easily done within grassroots football, obviously with lots of volunteers involved in the game, and they simply just play their matches on the weekend. So I agree with the thought behind it, probably not the fact that it's A and B, and I think it has to be managed really carefully.
I think the big thing that it avoids is a huge disparity between the ability level of two teams. And that's rubbish, isn't it? Just when there's a grassroots football game and it ends up 10-0, that doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve the team that win. Certainly doesn't serve the team that are on the wrong end of that. And I guess A and B teams in that scenario, Luke, is a good thing because it means that if then the B team is playing against children and teams of a similar level to them, then it's a good development exercise for them and enhances their football development.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the sort of what Jonny just alluded to there, it can't be called A and B team. I don't think that's sort of right. It's not right for the children to hear that, but I know that doesn't really happen much now. But like you say, the children have got to get the experience of playing football at a level that's right for them. And I think the way that the sort of the teams are selected, it sort of doesn't really sit right. That a selection policy on sort of current ability levels is right at under 5, under 6, under 7 years old, but at the same time, you want every child to get the most and the best possible experience. So I think the way that that's communicated, the way that it sort of pans out, I know what a massive thing is at them ages is that disparity in sort of how much some children have grown, some are a lot smaller, and sort of what that looks like can be a way of selecting them teams. There's a massive difference within children that are born at the start of the year, children that are born at the end of the year. So I think there's different ways of doing that, because I think the biggest sort of disparity in them ages a lot of the time within grassroots football is the difference in physicality between some children and others.
If you were running a grassroots club and you had a clear policy, then say you've got 3 teams at every age group, it's a really popular club, everyone loves to come to Chadwick's Grassroots Football Club, as it's called, and everyone's flocking there from the local community, and they want to be part of this. So you've got 3 teams within each age group. Would you have effectively ability appropriate groups? Would you mix them all up? What would be your approach, Chairman Chadwick?
I don't think I'd have ability appropriate groups within them youngest stages, sort of under 6, under 7s. I think that would be done on sort of the size of the children and sort of splitting them up that way. Children, the most important thing to me is that every child would have the opportunity to play football. I wouldn't be putting out on social media that I'm looking for a under 7 goalkeeper that can play out from the back or anything like that, because the most important thing is sort of children getting the opportunity to play. But I think as you sort of get older and you have more of a grasp on the ability levels, then it would make sense in under 9s, under 10s to make sure that every child gets the best possible experience, that it was done in ability appropriate groups, but make sure that that's communicated in the right way so every child has the opportunity to play football at their level, as it were.
Same question to you, John.
Yeah, I was just thinking when Luke was answering that, it's really difficult because to manage one team, let alone 3, is a tough task, and I'm sure any grassroots coaches watching on will know all too well the challenges that like grassroots football can present with managing parents, with managing like the players and game time and those types of things. I think I always look back to my time in academy football, and what we tried to do was create a personal sort of development plan for each and every child. The forefront of grassroots football and all football should be enjoyment. And so if the children are enjoying themselves, they're likely to stay involved in the game for longer, which will then, it's brilliant for the game. Might even see them develop and grow and progress as time goes on. So I think it's, if the children are having fun and enjoying themselves, and there is a way in which mixing the children up in the different age groups and adding variety to that, seeing the children then develop, that's what I'd probably try and look at, some sort of hybrid model where you could I guess, flow between the games, depending on who you're up against, probably mixing them all up in certain training matches and training games, but then also within the sessions, pairing them up with someone of a similar ability and those types of things. So I think it needs quite a lot of thought. Probably dodged around the question a little bit and danced around it, but I think it's so important to make sure the children are having fun and enjoying it, but then also try and look at, as an individual, what do they need at that point in their journey.
I think the child has to be the priority, doesn't it? It's like if they want to play with their mates, but they're not at the level of the mates, but that's what they want to do. I think that's absolutely. I think the sort of the challenges are when sort of clubs are putting the children into ability specific teams for that team to be successful for the adults involved in that club. I think, like Jonny says, the be all and end all is the child is happy, comfortable, and enjoying the experience of football, whatever grassroots level that may be.
What do you think, JC?
Well, I was just thinking, what if everyone else is doing that? So if you're in a league where that's what all the other teams are doing, your hand is forced a little bit, right? So if everyone's then picking an A and a B team, a stronger team and a weaker team, then the right thing for your children would be to do the same and conform. I think that's a real challenge, because if not, you're going to then be having a mixed team that might actually result in then trying to have, we talked before about equal playing time and all those kind of things, but then having children that are in a position where they are playing against bigger, stronger, better boys and girls, and it becomes a real challenge for them.
I think one thing that the FA could do, and forgive me if this is already a thing, but have like 3 or 4, I guess, rules in place or suggestions in place, is when a game gets to 3-0 to one side, the other team are allowed to put an extra player on, so it would then hopefully mitigate the difference in ability within the group, and that be like something that is just that happens across, especially those really young age groups. And then if it gets to 6, they're allowed to put another player on, or something like that, where it helps them balance that out.
Yeah, I think the FA do a really good job with that sort of thing in terms of, I know in them youngest age groups, the team's results are taken into account, and then they'll move leagues to look to get them into the most sort of ability specific groups, so they're playing children with similar results that will then make it a more even game, as it were.
Let's take it to the other end of football then, because we talked a lot about children's football. I think there's some really interesting views there, and ultimately what we're all saying is we just want it to be a great experience for children, so they grow up and develop a lifelong association with the game, absolutely love it, enjoy themselves, play against children that are bigger than them, smaller than them, quicker than them, slower than them, and just have great experiences along the way. But the most important thing is fun. I think we all agree with that, and I'm sure all of the listeners will too. What about then at the top end of the game? So you'll have experienced senior teams, first team football, and back in the day, it's a little bit different now, but reserve team football as well, which is effectively an A and a B team. How was that?
Yeah, so when I first moved up to Manchester United as a YTS player, that's what the names of the teams were. It was the first team, the reserves, the A team, the B team. What that was in essence was the A team was the older players, the young professionals. The reserves were usually sort of players that weren't playing in the first team, and a mixture of younger players, and the B team were the youngest players. That changed the season after I arrived, and it turned into under 17 and under 19 football, which was effectively that. So in terms of my experience with an A and a B team, there was never any, oh flipping heck, I'm in the B team, I must be rubbish sort of thing. It was just sort of the age group that it was. It was sort of more of an age banding more than.
But there was reserve team football, right?
The reserve team football as well, and like back then, obviously it's changed now where there isn't really reserve team football. It goes from under 21s to first team, but the reserve leagues it was like the Pontins League it was called, but there was some, you used to absolutely buzz off it as a young player because there'd be so many brilliant players you get the opportunity to play against. Was on the bench for Man United reserves at Leicester at Filbert Street, and the stadium was full for a reserve team game because Manchester United had a number of players coming back from injury. We played at Leeds United in the reserve team game. There was 30,000 people there, and it was like, in my mind, what it was back then was such a more effective way of young players sort of getting that experience before going into the first team, where obviously under 21s football, incredibly technical league. I've seen games in it, but probably doesn't prepare you as much as the old reserve leagues used to for first team football.
You've sort of shared your experiences with reserve team football. Now it's my chance. I've actually got a little bit of a story around reserve team football and my experience. So I actually scored past Robert Green at Carrow Road, Norwich City, in a reserve fixture. I was in year 6 at school. I was the mascot. I was the mascot in a reserve fixture. They chose our primary school to be ball boys. And I remember my teacher came to me and he said, James, he knew I was a Norwich fan. And all the other kids were ball boys and stuff. And he said, James, you're not going to be a ball boy. And I was like, what? I'm not going to be a ball boy. And he said, no, you're going to be the mascot.
Oh.
And my favourite player at the time was someone called Darren Eadie.
I thought he was a big Darren Huckabee fan.
Yeah, I just like all the Darrens.
yeah.
Anderton, love him as well. But Darren Eadie was my favourite player at the time, and he was playing in the game as well. So he was in the reserve fixture because just coming back from injury, he had his career was blighted by injury. But I was on the pitch before the game, and I scored past Robert Green.
Nice.
I think he let it in. But
you never know. We're never going to know that.
You never know.
Well, Robert Green watches the podcast. We'll ask him.
Yeah. I mean, but I must say, what a lovely story. I mean, to set up the whole podcast for this topic just to get that story out is fantastic work.
But it's worth a treat. We're now going to head into everyone's favourite part of the podcast, which is quick fire questions for Super Lukey Chadwick. Johnny, do you want to kick us off with a quick fire question?
Yeah, Chaddy, I've got a question for you, mate.
Okay, go on.
That's the whole point of that is this section. It's just like a quick fire question.
Well, I was about to say what the question was before Luke made it funny.
Yeah, sure.
I've got a question for you, mate.
Go on.
Who was the best player you've played against, but not as in the most famous or the best player, but actually like your toughest opponent? So obviously as a left or right midfielder, who was the toughest fullback that you played against?
Yeah, so that would be I've got two answers to that. So one would be Mikel Silvestre in training at Manchester United, because we used to do a lot of sessions where the guys that weren't playing would go up against the first team. I was obviously in the guys that weren't playing team, and always seemed to be up against Mikel Silvestre. And I can only remember getting past him once in that whole time. He was so strong and fast. He was just like more or less impossible to dribble the ball around. And the other would be Ashley Cole, someone that I played against a lot of time, again in training in the young England teams. And sort of, he was so quick. He was just like, I used to have a little one where I'd drop my shoulder and try and get around the outside of players. But to do that against him, he was so quick and nimble on his feet and would attack the other way so quickly as well. So I'd probably say they were as a right winger, they were the two best fullbacks that I ever sort of played against.
Nice.
Very good. My question just sort of follows on from the reserve discussion that we had earlier on. So just playing in those games, are there any other players that sort of came into those reserve team fixtures of note? Are there anyone that you sort of thought, wow, like I played in this fixture, didn't think much of it, and I turned up on the day and I was like, blimey, such and such is playing?
Yeah, I remember with the Leeds United game that I mentioned to, Lee Sharp was playing. He'd just moved from Manchester United to Leeds United, and I think that was a massive reason why there was such a big crowd there. So I played against him. I mean, there was so many. The guy that used to be at Aston Villa called Mark Delaney, he's another, when you talk about hard players to play against, played against him as a sort of 17, 18-year-old. He was right back for Aston Villa. I was playing left wing, and you sort of recognise the different level, as it were, where in a sort of A and B team, under 17s, 19s fix, you'd go into them and sometimes get a lot of joy against people your own age, but you'd recognise sort of the value of experience when you came up against sort of players that had played 100, 200 games in first team football. So there was a number of sort of top quality defenders that I'd played against that really made me sort of recognise, like, keep your feet on the ground, because you're not getting past these guys as easy as you get past sort of the players that were struggling at your own age.
Nice. Very, very good. We'd love to hear your views on today's topic. So the Football Fun Factory podcast comes up with loads of different topics all around youth football. And today we've been talking about A and B teams. Please do let us know in the comments all about your views and what you think. Join us again for the next Football Fun Factory podcast in 2 weeks' time.